36 hours after you do cold water immersion, you have a boost that's over 300% of your metabolism. I encourage anyone to just get curious and start some sort of cold practice.
Kristin Weitzel, founder of Sherpa Breath and Cold and Well Power, is a renowned health expert with a focus on female physiology who has been featured on stages around the world. She is a health and high performance maven, nutrition specialist, certified fitness trainer, master breathwork, and deliberate cold exposure guide with a focus on building stronger, healthier bodies for her clients. Kristin also hosts the Well Power podcast, expanding biohacking with an even broader audience, including ways females can align with their hormones, intuition, and life cycles, and just how far we all can go in pursuit of optimal performance.
The shiver is where the magic happens in many ways. It's the signal to the body that you've done this practice, that it needs to adapt. For me, the biggest benefit out of cold, there's a slew of them. We can talk about them all. The biggest benefit is...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms. Welcome to the next talk on the Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity, Live Beyond the Norms Health Summit. You can't swipe to the next video on a social media without someone talking about cold plunges, cold showers, maybe sticking your face in a bowl of cold water. This may be the algorithm and it's, feeding me what I want to see. But without a doubt, cold plunge is top of mind for many biohackers and longevity aficionados these days. Also, breathwork is often mentioned when talking about health, wellness, and longevity. So when my friend Natalie Nidam offered to introduce me to this next speaker, I hoped she would be joining us. Kristin Weitzel, founder of Sherpa Breath and Cold and Well Power, all of those fit this topic, is a renowned health expert with a focus on female physiology who has been featured on stages around the world. She is a health and high performance maven, nutrition specialist, certified fitness trainer, master breathwork, and deliberate cold exposure guide with a focus on building stronger, healthier bodies for her clients. Kristin also hosts the Well Power podcast, expanding biohacking with an even broader audience, including ways females can align with their hormones, intuition, and life cycles, and just how far we all can go in pursuit of optimal performance. As a progressive voice, dynamic leader, and active biohacking proponent, she questions how far the human body can go and helps people get there. It sounds like she helps people live beyond the norms. Kristin, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here with you, Chris, to speak at this longevity summit and get to know you better.
That's very cool. I'm excited about this. So you actually have a phrase that I found multiple times on your website. Your comfort zone is killing you. I have learned, and a phrase I use is like the size of your success zone is the size of your comfort zone. The size of your relationship zone, like successful relationship, the size of your money zone is the size of your a comfort zone. Could you tell us your background story, including how this phrase kind of landed as we'll call it a bit of a mantra, and how biohacking became your focus?
Yeah, for sure. I'll do my best to roll it into a snippet because it's a long journey. And I grew up a dancer and was always sort of interested in how I could fuel my body, but also stay lean, especially when I was dancing when I was younger. There was this sort of, in some way, I think, negative loop around body image that existed in the world of dance. So that's changed a bit today, not completely, but I really was thinking about how do I eat the foods that I love and still stay in shape and still be able to fit in my costume and make sure that I could fit the general form and shape of the dancer or the dance that I was performing. And that sort of sparked a level of understanding of the curiosity that I had around the human form. And then through all the years of, high school and college and even into working into corporate America, I started to get real curious about food and nutrition and yoga and movement and how I could push my body in space and internally clear my body up or clean my body out enough to move forward in a way that was the healthiest version of myself, right? And I went through lots of iterations. I went through iterations of like reading the book by the Diamond, husband and wife, the Diamonds, who was talking about food combining. I was like juicing in high school, 18 years old, green juice. People thought I was the weirdo. I was drinking bulletproof coffee the first year that Dave Asprey pushed it out. I was following Mark Sisson religiously and reading his Mark's Daily Apple every single day, trying to figure out and loving it because he would digest all of this research and then narrow it down to a few things that I could understand and I could kind of grok. And that was really a beautiful opening to understanding that people were picking apart the landscape of health and optimal wellness, right? Whatever we call it, whether we call it biohacking, optimal wellness, really leaning into longevity and navigating that. And I finally left that corporate job because I felt comfortable or ready enough, or I'm ready to be uncomfortable enough to leave a job that I liked a lot, but I didn't feel like it was leaving any legacy, and it wasn't really fulfilling all of everything I was doing outside of work, which is all my passion, right? It's making all the money to then do all the things that you actually really want to do. So I left to start coaching, and that was a big shift for me. And really the trajectory of that over the last, let's say 10 years has, I'm so thankful to have had all the professional corporate experience and then really coaching people deeply and predominantly a lot of females. I certainly coach men as well. That has given me this understanding of that tagline, and that tagline, your comfort zone is killing you, is something that I really started leaning into just about a year ago, because it was, the statement itself sounds a bit harsh, right? And I think that I needed to shake the trees a bit for people around wellness, because what I kept seeing repeatedly over and over again is even if people stuck to something for 3 months, they would like fall back into old patterns. Or I started working with clients over the course of a year. So a lot of my one-on-one work is a whole year of contact with a person to be able to discuss and analyze and open up and expand every part of their health landscape and their lifestyle so that they can keep the patterns that they create or we create together and live into longevity and health and well-being in the very best way possible. And then the dabble in all of this is for 6 or 7 years now. I really have been more and more focused on, in many ways, weaving breath and cold into my practice with one-on-one clients, into my online program, into all the work I do with Sherpa Breath and Cold training instructors, because to me, feel like even though it's a sensational, Chris, crazy, all over Instagram, people are like, doing all this stuff in cold. To me, cold I've witnessed it be a gateway to people getting healthier, to people getting more aware, to people tapping into who they already are so that they can go, damn, I can live a better life for myself, for my kids, for my family, for my community. I can be the fullest expression of myself and my health. But like it's 3 minutes, let's say, in the cold that gives that to a person when I'm fighting quite often to navigate with someone all of the challenges and patterns. There's this one big pattern interrupt, which is cold, which in many, many cases I've witnessed it really transform people or just open the doors to the work that we do, that why you and I are here.
That's very cool. So you talked about dancing. My mother was a ballerina. I grew up dancing in my living room. It's actually how I met my wife. Like when you get honest and people ask like who you are, like when you start breaking that down, the answer I prefer to give over, whatever my job is, father, or whatever, is I'm a dancer. So I love that. And I saw a video of yours where you talked about your body developing and no longer fitting the norm of a ballerina, and like how extremely frustrating that must be, because like I don't have control over that. And also there has to be like I kind of like it, but I also hate it. Like there's so many dynamics going there, right? And legacy and passion, you're literally sitting outside of an animal shelter, like that's partly legacy, partly passion. That's pretty awesome. You did say that comfort zone is killing you is maybe shocking, and I would add that it's potentially not shocking enough, like because it really is the thing that's stopping you, right? And so that I couldn't embrace that phrase anymore. So let's get on topic here, because that's kind of cool stuff. And now let's get into cold stuff. Cold therapy and ice baths are amazing. You coach people to embrace cold therapy and ice baths. what is the main benefit that drove you to start coaching others to do this?
Yeah, I mean, the main benefit, if I'm really drilling it down, is, I think it's a riff off of mental toughness, because we're building resiliency, right? You're getting in the cold. For anyone who's listening who hasn't done cold exposure, which is just, it could be a cold shower, it could be cryotherapy, it could be my favorite, which is ice baths, cold water immersion, deliberate cold exposure, whatever you want to call it. We're getting in a tub of icy cold water. It's like, I just was talking with John Welborn, who's like an ex-NFL guy, and he's like, is this really the hardest thing we're doing in our life, getting in a tub of cold water? Like, it's not a big deal. It's like, it isn't a big deal, and it's a big deal because the biggest benefit in bolstering our resiliency and giving ourselves this minimum effective dose of deliberate stress that is cold water and our bodies in it, we are understanding we can do hard things and understanding that we can be the calm in the middle of the storm. And so for me, the biggest benefit out of cold, I mean, there's a slew of them. We can talk about them all, but the biggest benefit is there's an aha moment that happens that we start to understand we have more capacity than we're giving ourselves credit for. And that coupled with the fact that when you put yourself in a body of cold water, whether it's nature or a tub, the longevity benefits that we get from that versus cryo or a cold shower, that's not to say those other things aren't beneficial in some way, but the cascade that creates a better avenue for longevity is really, it's 10x those other practices. So why not start with something that's going to make you a badass and remind you who you came into this world to be and let you know you can do hard things so you can sort of rise into resiliency and into the biggest dreams that you have for your life and live longer to do them all.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense as a gateway. One of the things that I talked about, have you heard the speech by Admiral McRaven, Make Your Bed? I don't know if you've heard this on YouTube. It's very interesting, right? Because I think he's a Navy SEAL and an admiral, and he just talked, it's a whole, I don't know, 15-minute speech maybe, and it starts with make your bed, because then you'll do the next task, and then you'll do the next task, and then you'll do the next task. And it's like, if I just start this process, then I'm making progress, and then rewind to the next, when you get home at night, the bed is made, right? And that's a reminder that when you wake up, make your bed. Is just a phenomenal video. If anybody hasn't seen it, go out there. It's McRaven, McRaven. And
cool.
so yeah, I really see this as, mental toughness. And one of the interviews that I've done for this longevity summit, I kind of brought the point of people who haven't really exercised when they were younger. Maybe they weren't on a sports team. Maybe they weren't a ballerina. Maybe they, didn't push themselves. They have a harder time as they get older because they tend to have this. And in fact, the person I was interviewing kind of admitted that this was her. They didn't have, they reach a little bit of pain, right? They reach a little bit of out of breath and like, oh, I'm out of breath, I should stop. And then, for those who have trained, I played semi-professional soccer. Like, no, that's not when you stop. Like that's when you start to push yourself even more. And I really like this idea as ice bath as a gateway. Are there any specific benefits? I think dopamine is one of them. What are some of the specifics that people who are like, well, I'm not going to do that if you can't say it's just, if the gateway is all you got, maybe it's not for me. What are some of those tangible benefits that people will walk away with?
Yeah, I mean, the tangible benefits are if you want to talk about actualization in the first day or two afterwards, it's just about 36 hours. Of course, we're all bio-individual. It's going to be a little different for everybody. But for 36 hours after you do cold water immersion, you have a boost that's over 300% of your metabolism. And that's good for a number of reasons. You are adapting to the cold in a way that's you will become more adapted to temperature fluctuation and wild changes. You hopefully are activating your cold shock proteins. The better those fold in the body, the better there's cellular communication. I work with a lot of people who have anxiety, depression, things like that. They may even have PTSD and be under the care of someone who is a psychologist or a therapist, right? It's out of my scope. But if they're managing and navigating those things, that I get to put them in cold water, and really the Huberman, thanks to Huberman, we all kind of know this word, I think, or the catecholamines, we're having norepinephrine and epinephrine, which is just adrenaline, noradrenaline, same thing, different phrases. A dopamine hit. We have oxytocin that is released. All of these neurochemicals in the brain are released And they are game changing for how you set your day up for success, how the next 24 plus hours goes for you, how well you sleep at night. That night, even we see better deep sleep scores, calmer mindsets. It's unreal. The mental game beyond the toughness, like when you internalize it, what's happening neurochemically, it's just undeniable. People changing their lives, addicts coming out of, being in recovery and being able to stay in recovery. I see. Look, a lot of it's anecdotal, and here's the reality on the research on cold. Number one, it goes hand in glove with breath. It has to, because our nervous system and our breath and putting ourselves into this highly sympathetic state are going to follow suit with each other. And really understanding how we can utilize the breath and the cold and this, our capacity to do the challenging thing and rise up to meet ourselves where we're at. And the research on all of the things that I'm talking about, there are definitive things we can see. Neurochemistry cascade, changes in the cellular structure, things like that. And there are definitive things in the research that they talk about, but the research is really widespread. So you'll hear quite often these things that are like, oh, it boosts your immune system. It's like over time, yes, it can. It's setting off a cascade to be able to do that. Just doing it once isn't going to change your life. You have to create a protocol, right? Many people are like, awesome, Instagram, let me get a photo of ice baths. But the research is wide. There is plenty of research to prove a lot of these points. And then there's also a lot of research that gets talked about. That's this swath of time, different temperature, different bodies, never enough women in the cold to be able to get good, adequate research yet. There's a lot of pieces for people to know. But if you're a science nerd and you're like, I'm only doing it if it says, I can recomp my body or I'm going to feel better. Like there's enough, double blind placebo trial type of studies that we can see these things tangibly happening in most bodies, right? There are some contraindications, but in most bodies. So those are it's undeniable. And I put I've lost count at this point, but it's definitely over 3,000 people one-on-one in cold bodies of water or ice baths, and also led many, many groups. I'm just coming off of this big past weekend of putting 40. It's the reason I'm at this animal sanctuary, Orange Twins Sanctuary. 2 choreographers are here in just outside of Los Angeles, who choreograph all of the shows and creative direct Ariana Grande's work, Kim Petras' work. And they're super passionate about animals and dance. And we work together to pull a cold and breath experience for 45 dancers in the industry that are highly professional, on the circuit, doing tours, auditioning, and all of these big shows that everyone sees in the world. And they're dealing with, quite frankly, a little bit of, body dysmorphia, depression, anxiety, the level of stress for going on to be able to perform live in the moment, all of that. And I see them in the beginning of the weekend. We work through breath, and by the end of the weekend, they're in cold and their eyes are opened. Or people said things to me like, oh my goodness, I got out of the cold and I've never felt like so grounded and calm and okay with myself. And that to me is just like a beautiful thing to witness. And I encourage anyone to just start, just get curious and start some sort of cold and breath practice.
All right, we'll talk a little bit about where to get started and some of that. Just one of the things that I noticed, oxytocin is one of the chemicals that is the love hormone. It sounds like you're in love with cold plunge. Like that's really.
I've done a lot. You're a lot like me, I think, in many ways. We've done a lot of biohacking. We've checked out a lot of things, right? You're digging into C60, and I'm going nutrition certifications and all the things. We're like these multi-hyphenate weirdos in the world of health in many ways. But this weirdness, this like extra expansion into these territories is so important for, I think, the future of longevity and wellness. And cold to me has really just wrapped itself around my heart because it changes people in such a short amount of time mentally to understand that they can begin to make the other changes that they want. So I am in love with the cold.
Yeah, it's the oxytocin. I love it. I mean, just, who cares? It's helping people. That's so much. All right. So you did talk about this. What are like ideal temperatures, max temperatures? Like I live in Houston, right? And I do like to wrap up my shower with a cold. We'll do extremely hyphenated because in the summer it's not cold. Like I just stopped doing it in the summer here because it's just irritating. Like it's like, this is cool water. It's not, I'm probably not getting any of the benefits, and it's just cool water. Why am I taking a cool water shower? Where can we sit? Where do we start to see benefits? And even like what are the guidelines you tend to recommend?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, for anyone who's listening who has the ability to get near any cold water or in a cold shower, even if it's a cool shower, because if you're nervous, you can start somewhere. But the reality is the biggest benefits are coming from this cold water immersion piece. And when I use the word we, like we see, I basically mean people, all the people in the landscape who are doing this from some sort of expert level. I work with the community at XPT. I have my own certification. I'm consistently inside of research looking at the time, the temperature, the numbers. But what I like to recommend to people is shoot for like 40 degrees or just sub 40. That number seems to be important in the literature because it's about that temperature that your cold shock proteins get activated. So how do we get to that 40 degree range of temperature? And then, you can see a bigger body of research with benefits under 50 degrees. And Huberman talks about that a lot as well, right? So like, a lot of the research will be like under the 50 degree mark, cold swimming and whatnot. So let's think about the fact that if we're nervous to do 40 because that feels a little bit too like, woo, okay, then maybe we start at 50 and we titrate down. When you are in a little bit warmer water, meaning like 50 or below, you can probably stay in a little bit longer than 40 or below, right? This is just like, this is the table and the arc that we work with. I shoot for new people, most people in general good health who don't have heart conditions, diabetes, there's a handful of other things that are contraindications. They can do, I'd say like 3 minutes is pretty doable for most people. I will sometimes start people out at 2 minutes if they're super nervous. But the big thing about time, and this is something I like to tell new people, is the big thing about time in cold water is it's that first 30 to 90 seconds. That's the part your nervous system will so highly react to that you just think, all I want to do is get out. And sometimes people get out. And the reality is that that is a beautiful mechanism built into our bodies, right? For survival. It doesn't know, your body and brain don't know that you're deliberately choosing to submerge yourself into this, freezing cold body of water or this ice tub. So you have to give the pause and the space and use your breath to navigate the nervous system in a way that's like, okay, I've set myself up to be uncomfortable, but not unsafe. And let me breathe that way. And then sit in this water for 3 minutes. And it's absolutely doable, and it's, for some people, they need a coach there. And that's why I have a job. And for other people, they can navigate it in the ways that they navigate other stressors, and they can just, pull off those 3 minutes. So I would say around the 40 degrees, awesome. Definitely at sub 50 to get benefit, and shooting for 2 minutes minimum, but 3 is a easy day for most people.
And you usually don't submerge the head, right? Like that's not a part, or is it? I don't know, because I know in the middle of the winter when it's cold, this is like 4 days. I have a swimming pool, and I've gotten under, and I've had some experience of like brain freeze. Like when you're drinking a slushie in your brain, you get that brain freeze. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. What are the guidelines there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if people are new to cold plunging, just getting in up to the neck is a really important piece, and not having to worry about putting the head under. It can feel daunting. It's important to get up to the neck in many ways because you have mammalian dive reflex activated, and that will help slow your heart rate. So if your nervous system is ramping up into the sympathetic tone, and you actually can have something that's going to slow the heart rate and help even you out in the cold and help you manage that experience, we want to use that to our advantage. So getting up to the neck, and pretty much I always say like all the way in, no hesitation, no expectation, all the way up to the neck, because I want people get into their waist or just their chest, and then they're like, oh, this is hard. And then it's a really interesting task for me to convince them that the next 6 or 8 inches is going to actually make it easier. They're like, oh, no. But it does. And people will have this thing that I call the turnover, where your physiological body shunts blood to the core, and you realize you're doing this hard thing, and you can actually settle into it just in that 30 to 90 second mark, depending on how often you've been doing it. So it's sort of answering the question that you ask, but head dunking is a thing. You can do it. I do it often. I don't try to keep myself under too long. And yeah, like there's different things that are happening. We do have a bit of the blood shunting that's up to the brain. We do have some that's like kind of 30% of it that's like moving around the body that feels, gives you tingles, gives you brain freeze, gives you all of that. And so again, this is like, I talk a bit sometimes about the Joe Rogan thing, where Joe Rogan, who's amazing and I'm a fan of, but he got into a cold bath for 1 minute the first day and then did it on Instagram, and then of course took pause for a day, and you know what happened, right? Jocko and Goggins and all these guys called him up and was like, you suck, you big MMA fighter, like they all called him out. And then the day after that, he got in for 21 and a half minutes live on Instagram, like the whole 21 minutes. And you can see him go through, this cascade of all the effects all the way up to like convulsive shivering in a way that's like at some point, and Suzanne Soberg talks about this in her research a bit too. At some point, it's like we're looking for a minimum effective dose. You stay in for 20 minutes, it's point of diminishing returns. And some would even say, some scientists would even say like this is a negative effect you're having on your cellular body. So just knowing that like there's always more. You can always do 6 head dunks or get in and out of the tub 9 times or whatever. Let's just like be smart. And, before we're like pulling Darwin's law and, swimming under frozen lakes without anybody around,
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
My 13-year-old son is a big fan of the Darwin Awards. You mentioned shivering in this case. Is that typical, right? Is that desirable? Are we trying to avoid it? Do we try and wrestle it with breath? Like where does shivering fit in this? It's obviously a great calorie burn, but maybe that's not the goal.
No. I love it. It's a great question because some people will get, and I just had some dancers get out and be like, oh, it has the shiver. It's really okay. You want to, when you're planning your deliberate cold exposure, your body is going to be different than mine. Everyone's body is going to be slightly differently adapted. So you want to get into the space where the time and the temperature that you choose. After you get out and a minute or two has passed, maybe you have a bit of a shiver response that starts, and that lasts a couple minutes, but then it like begins to calm. Maybe you're doing a few air squats or like you're doing the Wim Hof horse dance or whatever. And you're trying to sort of be with the shiver. The shiver is where the magic happens in many ways. It's the signal to the body that you've done this practice, that it needs to adapt. It's like, this is the minimum effective dose of stress response. It's like when we go to the gym and we lift weights, there is a micro tearing of the muscles. That is not a bad thing. That is helping us build hypertrophy or with muscle protein synthesis, get stronger, get more dense muscle, whatever we're looking for in a physique, in a physique style. And when we're doing this in cold, it's a similar thing. The shiver is that. And this just brings me to one key point that I love to share, which is many people who love to contrast, that's like a hot sauna and a cold plunge, start in the cold plunge and then they get out and they go right into the sauna. Or they do the sauna for 15 minutes and they get out and they go right in the cold plunge. And my question, or the note I want to make to those people is, could you wait 5 minutes in between each? Because instead of making the tool do the work to heat up your body, let's use the body to do the work to shift and adapt so that we can live longer, better, healthier, and have a cellular shift in adaptation, right? We become more resilient. So I like to tell people that because we don't know what we don't know. There's times in my life, my younger years, that I was like, yeah, I'm going to go throw myself in the sauna because I'm cold. But if you stand outside the sauna and you cool off, heat shock proteins activate if it's hot enough, and your body goes, oh, if Kristin's crazy enough to do this again, we better adapt and get better at this. And if I get out of the cold plunge and I wait and I go through the shiver response, it's a massive signal to the body to say, oh, okay, we need to get cold adapted. We need to build more resiliency, make this person harder to kill. So that's an important distinction. And again, if you're shivering convulsively for like 20 minutes, one of the key safety principles is like know where your heat source is, know where there's blankets, other human beings, hot showers, saunas, whatever. And of course, do the things you need to do to not be hypothermic, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you address the next, so shivering good. And maybe it's just, I think even this week, maybe it was last week, it was probably last week, got to the point of just having kind of rib cage shivering. Like, I don't think even my hands were trembling. It's just like, the muscles were like firing, going, hey, we got to warm up here. So shivering good. My next question was going to be, does a hot shower, like getting into hot water right after a cold plunge or a cold experience, and you kind of answered that, like give it 5 minutes, let your body adapt to the current situation, and then you can do this contrast therapy. I think that's really good. How does let's talk a little bit about breath. Like, how do you incorporate breath into these cold experiences?
Yeah. And so if our breath is the remote control to the nervous system, if our breath is going to tell us what state we're in, then our breath can do two things, right? It can correlate with your emotionality, your emotions, and it can adjust them. You can adjust your emotions by adjusting your breath, because the nervous system is highly related to that. And you can adjust your response to something by using the breath. So if we, there's everybody knows who Wim Hof is. If you don't know who Wim Hof is, many of us wouldn't be here right now talking about cold so prevalently and having others listen if it wasn't for his work in the world over the last 25 plus years. He, so important, really important, standing on the shoulders of giants. He's well known for this like super ventilated breathing style where you do these rounds of breath that bring you into a sympathetic state, and you're basically breathing in a way that you're sympathetic, and you get into the cold water, which is a sympathetic response. And so you're already match setting what's about to happen. So the notion is that it will be easier for the body. I think, cool. Do all the different breathing styles you want to play the game and navigate, and make yourself harder to kill and all of that. Do that as you get a more advanced practice. That's awesome. As you're playing with non-absolutist thinking in the way that we can all breathe differently. We can all do cold in many different ways. The thing that gets lost a lot in the sauce is context. It's like, what's your context? So for me, when I'm talking about breath, I want to practice for the game of life. I want people to get into cold water, not because they're going to be like, I'm the best ice bather there is, ice bather there is in the world. I want people to get in the cold water so they can get good at their lives. And so if that's the case, and I'm teaching people how to manage stress, I really want to encourage people to start their practice the way that is going to support managing stress in their life. Right? Because we can become resilient in many different ways. But if you start at the side of the tub or before you get in the shower and you breathe calmly, nasally, longest exhales of the day, and you just settle yourself in best you can, because the anticipation of the cold can be worse than the cold itself sometimes. But if you exhale nasally and you settle yourself in, and then you decide, okay, and you step all the way in up to your neck in the cold water, you'll have an initial response. It might take your breath away. You might need 10 seconds to calm it. But if you can get down to that nasal breathing and calmly set your breath up for success, you're reminding the body you are safe in the discomfort. And when your body knows it's safe, it kind of is like you're breathing like you're okay, even though the skin and the tissues and everything in the nervous system is also taking in the sympathetic charge. And it says, okay, you can be here. I feel like you can be here. It kind of talks back to you. This is all happening in a millisecond. But breathing calmly before you get into the cold, match setting and keeping your state calm is a really, I think, important thing to do. Because when you, Chris, have, this, hopefully none of this ever happens to you, but like the phone call where you lose your job or you're fired or your person sends divorce papers or the shit hits the fan or something happens with the kids or there's like some, trauma, you have to run help a friend. You don't know that that's coming. You don't have a minute to be like, let me superventilate, let me prep myself, let me get my body in order for this thing the shit that's about to hit the fan. It's training for the game of life. But if you can keep your breath calm before and normally and in your life, and you practice that, and then you deliberate the stress, and then you breathe calmly through it, then when the thing comes, then when the whole chaos happens and everyone else is freaking out, perhaps you can say, okay, I have these tools. I can use the breath. I can take a moment to be like, Oh my God. And then I know how to regulate myself to manage the stress of life. Right. And that's why I want people to train for that. And then when they feel really good at that, then they can just go sideways and try all the different things that are like cool and fun and 40 head dunks and all of that, you know?
Yeah. So your breathing kind of mindset is get into the parasympathetic state, right? The rest and digest state to keep you calm, to get into it. And where Wim Hof, and I've seen some of the videos where you're right, he's getting into the sympathetic state, which is what you're gonna be once you get in the water anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're tackling the mental challenge and also arming people with ways to tackle the mental challenges of life. I think that's pretty awesome. One thing that comes to mind, and I had a conversation with he's actually a good friend of mine. He's a two-time ultra running champion. So his name's Anthony Kunkel. He talked about I think you can breathe through shivering. Like you can control a lot of shivering with breath, I think. And he kind of made the point that maybe that's not so good. If you're doing these cold plunges, like shivering is kind of the goal. Like, how do you balance, like, hey, you want this response, so how do you manage that? Like, I understand stay calm getting into it, and that can get you over the hurdle. Where does that sit, though, with shivering?
You mean shivering when you get out? Or sometimes people will start to shiver a little in the tub, like a light shiver. So in either scenario, like, I tell people, like, don't worry about quelling the shivers. So many of us are running around trying to, like, look perfect, be perfect, not be out of control, like, whatever, all the time. And this micro contraction of the muscles to heat your body back up and to try to adjust things. And let me speak very freely, if that's okay with you, Chris, that, you know, there are quite often there are people who are getting in the tub and a shiver response may happen in the first 60 seconds. Now, I'm a coach and I know what to watch for when it's like time to get someone out. But there is something when we see animals, I've seen this like slow mode down on, you know, YouTube or something. We see like an antelope that's been chased and it has a somatic response of letting go of trauma by shaking, almost like shivering the body. And so that somatic release, sometimes I will have people get in the cold and I'm like, oh, this in 15 seconds, you're probably not going to shiver physiologically because of the temperature. So sometimes people will get in and it's sure, it's like not, it's the minority, but it can happen. And shivering across the board to warm us back up, and that there is a shivering and a shaking that can happen as we're processing and letting go of, it doesn't have to be big T trauma. It could be little trauma, shit that's affected us during the day, other stress in the stress bucket. And I really think that that's an important thing to recognize and just to let the shiver be what it is.
How often per week do you recommend doing a cold plunge? Let's say you have easy access, right? Because that's certainly one of the considerations.
Sure. This is the thing is like, you know, it's like so much of what we see online and on social is like $10,000 ice bath. It doesn't have to be that expensive. It can be easily accessible. You can get, for this weekend workshop we just got troughs from the farm store. You can use a bathtub if you have it at home and just buy ice at the 99-cent store. I think people, you need to develop a practice. Like that's the reality, is a protocol, if you want to call it a fancy biohacking protocol, whatever's going to get you to do it, and adhere to that practice. I think there can be seasons and it depends on the context. Again, if you're like training heavily, if you're going to get on stage and clear heels and pose, if you're going to, be in a professional sport, there's times to do more or less ice baths for sure. There's context that's so much. I always say safety is queen and context is king. And getting into an ice bath 3 times a week will serve most people really well if you can do that. Many people are doing like every day, 365 days a year, or like 30-day challenges. All that's fine in some way, but I would like to highlight this one thing about women in their reproductive years. Just like fasting and cold plunge can be an overtaxing of the system for, I specifically want to say, the female hormone profile. Like, do I have 40 pages of research to document that? No. Have I seen clients have their periods go sideways and clients already having hormonal dysfunction, even more dysfunction from doing cold too frequently? Yes. I just want to have that shout out for females that, and anyone, but in the female reproductive hormone profile, those years are, especially if you're trying to get pregnant, right? Like there are ways that the cold can help, but overdoing anything, supersizing anything isn't necessarily the answer. It's just could be potentially more stress on the body. So I tend to be more conservative with women. It's like, great, you come to me saying you're 4 days a week, you're getting in the cold as a female. I'm going to be like, awesome. That's a super win. You're not failing because you're not getting it every day. And again, I did a 30-day challenge in January and all my clients were like, oh my God, you did 30 days in a row. It's like, it's fine. I'm not doing 365 days in a row. And for some people who are navigating, mental well-being challenges, they want to get in the cold because they're seeing the benefit and it makes them survive and live and even thrive every day. So I think consent and autonomy are really important about what you do with your body. But I would like to say to people who are born as physiological females, it's a good idea to think about, hey, what feels good in my body? And if I have that hour of self-care every day, then maybe 2 or 3 days a week I'm doing cold, and one day I'm lifting heavy weights, which is wildly important, or 2 days I'm lifting heavy weights, and one day is mobility, and that we're varying up the things that are our tools in our toolkit. Do a meditation, and take a hot bath sometimes. We need to self-care in all the ways. It's about the variance. So yeah.
All right. You have taken these and many others on the road, #VanLife. How has this changed your perspective on health?
Specifically the cold and breath, or being on the road now for the last, let's say, almost 50 days.
What comes to mind?
What I notice about being on the road, because like you put your comfort zone is killing you all over your materials, the universe is going to say, okay, great, go do this in a van. And what a beautiful opportunity. Like I'm all here for it. And I feel blessed to be able to be in this van and do this. I feel really grateful. And what a sharp learning curve. That's been really interesting and letting me as a elite coach apply the tools, because it's like, damn, different city every 2 days, different group of people, learning how the whole van works, all of it has been really interesting and challenging and built my resiliency even more. I bought a guitar because I was like, I need to get more neuroplastic. And then I was like, not the first 45 days of this van life, because there's so many things to learn that are new. But the reality of these practices and being in van life doing this, what I'm seeing in the health landscape is, oh my goodness, there are so many underserved communities. I'm driving around, and a lot of the reason I'm doing the workshops and doing these other things that are like my paid programs, I love to work with all of the people I get to work with. But part of the reason is there's a landscape of people that are underserved, right? Whether you call somebody who's a professional dancer underserved or not, the reality is they're standing next to a celebrity on a stage that's making millions of dollars, and they're being paid, a few $100s a show, and they're still scraping to get together, funds, and they're not always consistently working. I'm so stoked. I woke up this morning to a text. There's a beautiful BIPOC center in Denver, Colorado on the 27th of November that does like community drop-ins, pay what you want, really trying to help communities who don't have the economics to do some of these things or learn some of the just health practices. And we posted it like a couple days ago and it's sold out already. And that's like, I get to do that work because the paid work helps me do the other work, and finding and seeing as I drive through Alabama or Iowa or even bigger cities that there's communities that aren't getting just a few hours, just a little education, just a little conversation around here's the ways that we can serve ourselves best. And I think it would do us all good to recognize in the health and longevity landscape that like there are ways that we can do the extra thing or go the extra mile that's just maybe just takes a little time out of our day. Or for me, I've been making recordings and then I can share that to people who can't necessarily get me in person live, and getting that out to underserved populations so that they can find these practices, because the reality is breathing is free. And if someone gives you a couple tips on how you can breathe yourself into feeling better, then hell yeah, that's important. And cold exposure doesn't have to be, and this, I've been kind of banging this drum for a long time, but like, especially as I'm on the road, it doesn't have to be a $40,000 ice bath or a $10,000 thing. It doesn't have to be, even like an inflatable costs $5,000. It can be like Costco has cheap ice, a 99-cent store. I'm out here in LA, Smart and Final. Like these places have inexpensive ice. You can get your friends together, someone who has the best tub in their house on a weekend where everybody brings 2 bags of ice, and you can just try these things in community and build a love for each other and really build your health. And again, hopefully working on that gateway of saying, hey, I want to be better. I want to be healthier. I want to really explore and be open to the opportunity to shift my state of being and live longer, because that's infectious, right? You know this, Chris. It's infectious. One person in a circle of 10 starts doing the crazy thing, and then everyone starts to be like, oh, let me breathe, and let me mouth tape, or let me get in an ice bath, or, let me take this new supplement, and really shift the game. That's the biggest thing I notice. And I want that for our world. There's people out there that are they're not even necessarily afraid. They don't feel included to do these practices.
That's awesome. All right, so we're coming to the close here. I've got some standard questions. We do need to kind of go through these quickly. First, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
I mean, it'd be real nice to live to 150. I think coupled with that, more as I get older, I really feel into, in this season of my life, how I can live every moment in presence and with joy, because there are so many things that are out of my control. But I'll be damned if I'm not going to control everything that's in my control, including my health and well-being and nutrition and longevity. So if I had to put a ticket on it, I'd say 150, but I'd want you there. I'd want my friends there with me. So you all better live to 150 with me so we can,
we all have to sign that petition. How long do you think humans can live, right? So Dr. David Sinclair is like, maybe it's forever. Dave Asprey is like, his target's 180. How do you think there's a limit to how long humans can live?
I think that there will be a time, maybe in my lifetime, maybe just after, that humans can live indefinitely, because we start to plug different mechanics into our body, that we 3D print a heart and figure out how to make it work.
That's the what is it? The terminal velocity of aging. Like, I think that is on the horizon, right? I'm with you on that one. How about 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets? Let's call them shortcuts, because everybody likes shortcuts to longevity and a long health span that you can share.
Nasal breathing. I know that's like, the thing to say, and sometimes people oversell nasal breathing. It's not that we should be doing that all the time, but really just setting an awareness for yourself, super simply, even if you set a little lovely chime on your phone every day to just check in. Am I nasal breathing? Am I mouth breathing? We serve ourselves so much better for states of calm and lower stress with nasal breathing. I think another thing is, look, whatever form you can get them in, electrolytes of some sort, just making sure you're getting hydrated. Whether it's like you want to be super fancy and drink hydrogen water and just, all the things, or you just can get a simple, inexpensive electrolyte, low sugar electrolyte that really feels good in the body. Hydration has been a thing for me that's helped me feeling younger and energized. And then, I would hearken to the thing about, so Molly Eastman is a good friend of mine. She's Sleep is a Skill is her podcast. And I think this is a free hack. My mother always says my best biohack at night to get good rest is to close my eyes. It's like, you got to shut your stuff down and you got to get sleep. We're only as fit as what we can recover from. And things like meditation and sleep are the things that are going to help us recover.
I'm going to be interviewing her tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to Sleep is a Skill. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. All right. How can people contact you?
Instagram, biohacking.breath.cold, sherpabreathandcold.com, and wellpower.life. On all of those handles, channels, websites, all the things, there are ways that you can download inexpensive or free biohacking guides, breathwork audio, ice bath audio. I'm all over the Brain Tap app doing breathwork. I'm all over the Othership app leading cold exposure tracks. So, and I answer all my own DMs, which is pretty intense, but I'm here for it. So just write me, ask questions, and I'll share everything I have to offer.
All right. So I got IG, biohacking.breath.cold, right?
Yep.
And then what were the next two?
SherpaBreathandCold.com is a website. I do instructor trainings all over North America. I have 160 instructors now, and I train facilities and sports performance and all of that. And then wellpower.life, that's the podcast. That's the hub for it all.
All right. Something in the near future you are excited about?
More of what I did this weekend, which is pretty groundbreaking work. I got to apply breath to sports performance for a group of dancers who never get served insight on how they can build their endurance and also build their resiliency through processing through a breathwork journey, doing mouth-taped sprint style choreo, and getting into cold exposure. So working with athletes that are on the come up and communities that are really in need of these simple educational points to be able to sort of change the way that they show up in the world, and also so that they can live into their dreams really fully and hopefully, till they're 150 years old.
That's awesome. 150. All right. You can find her on IG, biohacking.breath.cold. You can find her website, Sherpa Breath and Cold.com, and then wellpower.life. There's some freebies that you can find on those. Just keep searching around. I see you have hashtag VanLife at the top of your Sherpa Breath and Cold. That's pretty awesome.
I do.
Kristin,
I
thank
put
you so
the
much.
pin in our cities, that wherever city I'm in, I put a pin in it. So if I'm near you, hook up with me.
That'd be very cool. Kristin, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was exquisite to spend time with you, Chris. Keep doing this beautiful work. I'm really honored to be here with you, and good luck today.
Thank you.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.